My God. TheHylden. We walked right into their trap.
As the fourth game of the series, I readily admit that Blood Omen 2 is my least favourite of the 5 Legacy of Kain games. With its blocky character models, generic plot, repetitive combat, and storyline inconsistencies, not to mention the vastly inferior dialogue when compared to the rest of the titles, Blood Omen 2 was a massive disappointment. It just doesn't hold a candle to the quality exuberated by the other games. However, one interesting thing to come out of Blood Omen 2 was its exploration into the race of creatures known as TheHylden. The first time we hear of TheHylden is at the very end of Soul Reaver 2, during Kain's dire warning to Raziel about the threat they pose. They were introduced as antagonists for Blood Omen 2's new alternate timeline, devised prior to the completion of the second Soul Reaver game. Interestingly, the origin of TheHylden's design appears to stem from an unrelated and unfinished project called Sirens, which shares similarities in artwork and storyline with Blood Omen 2. Although Sirens never came to fruition, it does seem to have somewhat influenced the creation of TheHylden, given their likeness to the daemon creatures present in Sirens. In the dark gothic world that is Nosgoth, 3 intelligent species exist: the vampires, the humans, and the Hylden. Hidden murals scattered throughout Nosgoth depict the ancient Hylden race as being more humanoid in appearance, having full cheeks rather than the skeletal structures we often see them parade. Whether these humanoid depictions are exaggerations of their once fairness and nobility is unclear, given that in the scraps of other images we see, the Hylden are shown to be wholly demonic in nature. The most distinguishing feature of the Hylden is the presence of a head crest and small, wind-like crests on their backs. Along with their pale, sickly skin and bizarre muscle structure, it's safe to say that the Hylden are very different compared to humans and vampires. They are not only distinct in appearance, but also in their method and intention, taking a keen interest in technology that went well beyond anything the humans of that era could achieve. In fact, such was their prowess for being technologically adept beings, they were as equally powerful as the vampire race, with both species dominating the Nosgoth hierarchy. Far back into Nosgoth's distant past, the Hylden outright opposed the ancient vampires' dogmatic religious beliefs regarding the will of fate, to which all souls are compelled in an inexorable cycle of reincarnation. Because of their opposition to the vampire god, this inevitably led to a vicious conflict between the two races. The Hylden's rejection of the Elder God's doctrine concerning his will of fate would suggest that they discovered a way to attain immortality. This is because when a creature dies in Nosgoth, their soul is invariably returned to the will. As the Elder God latched itself onto the will in order to feed off its spiritual energies, the Hylden's exemption from the will would explain why they had incurred his wrath, and why he prompted his followers, the vampires, to ignite a war against them. Knowing what we do now about the Elder God's deception of the ancients, and how he has manipulated all of history to keep his wheel turning, I'm inclined to side with the Hylden, as they are the victims of this war. However, while they may have started out as innocent, this conflict, which has raged over a millennium, has no doubt twisted them. As the war was spiralling towards its climax, the Hylden created a weapon which they had hoped to use to wipe out every race in existence, barring their own. This weapon was known as the Device, capable of channeling the energies of a creature known as the Mass, which could destroy any living thing with a thought. Progress on the Device came to a grinding halt, as the Mass lacked personal sentience with which it could project its terrifying ability. Before a solution could be found, the ancients raised the Pillars of Nosgoth, sealing the Hylden away to the demonic dimension with the intention of trapping them there for all eternity. It's important to note here that their ghastly demonic appearance may or may not be a direct result of their long-term banishment to the demon realm. This is interesting because the vampire murals, which despite being from ancient times, depict them in their modern reduced forms, raising the question as to the authenticity of the Hylden's depiction of themselves. Having said that, the Ancients' depiction may simply be propaganda, or their personal take on the Hylden. After all, history is written by the conquerors. Still, the Hylden would not go quietly to the demon dimension without putting up a decent fight, and as they were banished, they inflicted the Ancients with an insatiable blood curse. This curse was threefold, for it made them animalistically bloodthirsty, while also rendering them sterile and incapable of having children. But by far the most terrible consequence of their curse, from the Ancients' perspective, was that it imprisoned them in immortal bodies, separating them from their god. As if to add salt to the wound, the Hylden made the vampires unable to pass over into the afterlife from old age and have their souls returned to the wheel. In light of their newly acquired immortality, the elder god had gone silent to them. Thus, many vampires committed suicide in the hope of rejoining their god. After their expulsion from the material realm, the utterance of the word Hylden became strictly taboo, and they referred to their ancient enemy only as the Unspoken. From within the demon realm, the Hylden plotted to re-enter Nosgoth by manipulating the course of history to their advantage. Although banished into another dimension by the Pillar's sorcery, the Hylden were still capable of devising other means to influence events within Nosgoth. As the Pillars decayed and the binding weakened, the barriers between dimensions grew thin, enabling Hylden to possess both human hosts and the decaying flesh of corpses. They could enter the physical world in the form of revenants, rising from the grave to assail Kain and Raziel. To further understand their role in the series, we have to consider how Blood Omen 2 was developed. The game initially entered into development at a stage when the first Soul Reaver game was still in production. Crystal Dynamics, seeing potential in Kain's character, decided to take a ballsy move in splitting the franchise into two distinct series. The Soul Reaver arc, which focused on Raziel and the elder Kain, and the Blood Omen arc, which focused on the younger Kain. Essentially, at that time, Crystal Dynamics was still trying to milk the series, and ended up organising a separate development team to manage the Blood Omen project. In hindsight, this wasn't the smartest idea, as Blood Omen 2's storyline clashed with the plans for the plot of Soul Reaver 2. Yet despite this oversight, the brilliant Amy Hennig, lead director of both Soul Reaver games and Defiance, was able to reconcile most of the inconsistencies by introducing a plot element that explained the Hylden were conspiring to alter Nosgoth's timeline for their own benefit. In the final title of the series, Legacy of Kain Defiance, Hennig merged the character of the Dark Entity from Blood Omen with that of the Sarafan Lord in Blood Omen 2, reintroducing him as one of the major antagonists across the whole series, the Hylden Lord. As it turns out, many of the central events in Legacy of Kain were masterminded by the Hylden's general, all in an effort to break the binding and escape back to their home.
You pathetic creature. You haven't got a clue. The seduction of the Circle and possession of Mortanius, Ariel's murder, the corruption and collapse of the Pillars, all orchestrated as a prelude to this moment. We sought an incorruptible vessel, and you provided one. We required the blood of our ancient enemy, and you delivered Janos Audron, having first been lured to the heart of darkness. Best of all, you murdered the Scion of Balance to get it. We've already won.
The Hylden Lord was a master strategist who was able to devise a plan so meticulous for which all foreseeable outcomes benefited his race, no matter if some of those outcomes superficially appeared to end in failure. Through Mortanius, the Hylden Lord masterfully orchestrated the events of Blood Omen in the hopes of destroying the Pillars. His machinations were such that he was destined to win even if Kain succeeded in surviving. Specifically, he made certain the Pillars would collapse if either the Sign of Balance remains corrupted or if there were no vampires left to sustain the barrier between worlds. By ensuring that the corrupted Sign of Balance was the last vampire left standing, the Pillars were doomed to fall regardless of whether Kain lived or died. That was the brilliance of the Hylden Lord's strategy, in not choosing a single path to victory, but rather deciding that all paths led to his victory. And we later learn that his plans didn't just stop there. He was also banking on Kain, journeying back in history to save Raziel from being imprisoned by the Soul Reaver blade. This act would introduce a fatal paradox, resulting in Raziel reviving Janos Ordrin, thus giving the Hylden Lord a suitable vessel needed to open the gate to the demon realm. What strikes me about all this though, is how the Hylden Lord's plans completely crumble by the end of Blood Omen 2. I mean, for all his cunning and scheming, it seems a bit of an oversight to think he can succeed in striking a younger Kain down, when he still needs this Kain to one day travel back into the past and ensure that Raziel is not consumed by the Reaver. What I am saying is that the Hylden Lord would not even be here in the flesh if not for the direct actions of the elder Kain. It's one of those plot inconsistencies between Blood Omen 2 and the rest of the series which is not easily rectified. But by far one of the biggest disappointments in Blood Omen 2 was his downfall. At the start of the game, the Hylden Lord uses an artifact called the Nexus Stone to negate the effects of the Soul Reaver, giving him an advantage in his fight against the young vampire. And then at the end of the game, Kain uses the same tactic to gain an edge over the Hylden Lord. It's like you thought so far ahead to come up with this brilliant plan to trap the main characters into altering the timeline for your benefit, but then didn't have the foresight to consider the possibility of your enemy using the same trick you used to defeat him against you.
You have won the battle, but the war between your kind and mine will never end. Our banishment in the demon dimension also ensures our immortality. One day, we shall return.
Should your kind reach that place of banishment again, I will be waiting.
You will not live that long.
I have lived long enough to dispose of you.
According to the developers, the Hylden would have a prominent role in the cancelled Dark Prophecy sequel. More clues about their society in the demon realm would have been revealed, since a large portion of the game was said to take place there. In exploring the demon dimension, Kain would learn how the Hylden have adapted to their hostile environment by preserving what civilization and technology they could. They would utilize the glyph network to create areas of order amidst the chaos. Using their sorcery and rune technology, they are said to have created bubbles that kept them safe from the corroding forces, but soon those would begin to twist and fail until all the Hylden magics dwindled. The dynamic between the Hylden and the demons would also be touched on. Faced with their inevitable downfall by the eroding and corrupting effects of the demon realm, they would be pressed to employ every effort and means to escape their damnation. The Hylden would go as far as to bring demons into their service, even succeeding in subjugating some of the lesser natives to serve in their vanguard, while fragile alliances are made with more powerful ones. I would have so liked to have delved deeper into the Hylden society if the unfinished Dark Prophecy sequel was released as originally intended. I feel like there is still much of their story left to be told. Like any intelligent species, the Hylden have their own hierarchy, conflicts and insurrections, and it would have been a treat to see that play out as alliances are forged to push Kain to his limits. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like, and please feel free to add your thoughts and theories about the Hylden down in the comments. For more Legacy of Kain lore, do subscribe, as there are many more videos about this incredible work of art to come. See you in the next Soul Reaver video. Peace.